What's going on, everybody? Thanks for watching again. Welcome to another video. Today we're driving a 1988 Porsche 924S. This is one of my own cars that I've owned for about 3 years now, and I really like this car. Just in general, it's a great car. It's the 924S's are kind of misunderstood. The 924 originally came out in 1977. And it had actually started life in the early 70s as a project that Volkswagen had hired Porsche to engineer and develop for them. It was going to be a two-door, four-seat, family-oriented hatchback, but a sporty car. Volkswagen bailed on the project because it was going to be too expensive, the oil crisis was happening, and management didn't want to spend the money on developing the new platform. And at the same time, Porsche needed a new entry-level car to replace the 914 that was going to be out of production in 1976. So they finished up the 924 development and launched it as a 77 model. It was powered by an Audi-derived 2-liter with about 100 horsepower, and it had an Audi transmission. So Porsche made the original 924 from 1977 to 1982. There was a couple of different versions. There was a 924 Turbo, there was a special competition version called the 924 Carrera GTS, which is a very rare car. They only made a couple hundred of those. And then in 1983, the 944 came out and replaced the 924. For the 944, Porsche took the basic 944 body shell and they added wider fender flares, larger wheels and tires, and they also gave it a Porsche engineered, developed, and built 4-cylinder engine that was a 2.5 liter. And the 944 was hugely popular. It was considered one of the best handling cars that you could get in the US for any amount of money. A few years after the 944 came out, it had gotten kind of expensive, and so once again Porsche needed an entry-level car in the mid-80s. So they went back and they dusted off the 924 body and interior, and they slotted in the 944 driveline. And that was the 924S, which is what we have here. It was made from 1986 to 1988. It has a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder front engine, rear-wheel drive. The transmission is in the back, so this is one of Porsche's transaxle cars where they put the motor in the front, transmission in the back. So these would be the 924, the 944, 928, 968, and these are all great cars. They're really well balanced and fun to drive. And of course, this one is a manual 5-speed. So they only sold the 924S for 2 years in the US. They sold it in 87 and 88. In 87, they sold about 7,000 924Ss in the US, and in 88, they only sold about 2,000. So definitely, relatively rare model. When it came out in 87, it had 150 horsepower and about 142 foot-pounds of torque. But in 88, they actually gave the car a slightly tuned-up engine, basically. They gave it the same engine that was in the 944 in 88. So this 88 has 160 horsepower and about 155 foot-pounds of torque. So it's not a massive improvement over the previous year, but it's noticeable. It's a little quicker. It's a little more responsive, because what they did was they raised the compression ratio from 9.5 to 1 in 87, and in 88 they gave it a 10.2 to 1 compression ratio, and that also they shifted the power band up higher on the rev range, basically. So peak horsepower came in around I want to say 5,500 RPM, and for 88 it's at 5,900 RPM, so you got a little bit more revvy of an engine, and you can tell when you drive the car. The mid-range feels stronger, and it also just feels like it comes to life a little bit more in the mid-range. I had an 87 924S, and I can tell the difference between this engine and the one in my 87. And the car weighs about just over 2,700 pounds, so it's not the lightest car. So the thing about the 924S, as a driver's car, it's, compared to a 944, it's lighter, it's more simple, and it's a little more direct than the 944. To me, this is one of the kind of purest, most simple expressions of Porsche's transaxle concept. I mean, this is it's relatively light, it's a narrow body car, it doesn't have the wide 944 flares, it's got small tires, so it has a small contact patch. It has 15 by 6 inch wheels, and stock form it had 195 tires. I think it has 205 series on it right now, but still, that's a real, it's a pretty small tire. But the advantage is that it has a nice kind of nimble feel to it, and you kind of reach the slip angles that much quicker. So yeah, this is a nice, pure kind of simple sports car experience, I think. So this particular example, also the other reason I like it is it has a couple of really cool options on it. One is the paint. It's a maraschino red metallic, which is a pretty rare color on a 924 because most of the ones that I've seen in the US have been black, white, red, or silver. Those seem to be the most common colors, so this maraschino red is very unusual. I've never seen another 924 this color. I think the most important option that this car has are the sports seats. I have never seen another 924 optioned out with sports seats. These are very comfortable, they hold you in really well, and they just add a whole nother dimension to the driving experience, I think. It was 0 to 60 in like 7.8 seconds when it was new, so not anything that quick, but it has a real, like, kind of eager character to it. I mean, it's a 4-cylinder, so it sounds decent. It's not, it's smooth, and it has a nice little growl to it, but it's very quiet. I actually want to put an aftermarket muffler on it to make the exhaust sound just a little better. But, the engine, it feels really responsive, and part of that is definitely the 88 engine. But, this 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, I mean, it's got balance shafts, so it's smooth, it revs really well. At idle, they feel a little coarse, I think, but then as you rev them out, they smooth out. And, this thing it'll pull all the way to redline. It's a kind of a punchy little engine. I mean, it's not, like I said, it's not overly powerful, obviously. It doesn't have a ton of power, but it has an engaging character to it. And the transmission, I like these 944, 924 transmissions. The shifter has a really good kind of heft to it. It has a good weight. So you can still shift it really quickly, but it has a nice mechanical feel to it. I think one of the most impressive things about the 924S is the handling of it. It's got a 50-50 weight balance, so it's very well balanced. And, it's easy to drive quickly. It's confidence inspiring, doesn't do anything, even when you're pushing it really hard, it never does anything, like it never snaps as far as like oversteer or anything like that. In tighter turns, it definitely understeers. You kind of scrub off some speed if you fly into a tight turn. In higher speeds, you kind of feel the tail get a little bit light, but, not in a bad way. Just kind of like, it kind of takes a neutral stance through corners, and it just feels kind of light on its feet and really has quite a bit of mechanical grip. And I have the tires are nothing too special in this thing. They're older, tires. They're not like new performance tires, and this thing handles really, really good. It does move around quite a bit. It's got quite a bit of body roll and lean, and it has quite a bit of squat and dive as well. Once you get used to the fact that it moves around, it feels really reassuring driving it aggressively. You come into a corner and get it settled, and then the car just takes a nice neutral stance and whips through corners. I mean, this thing, you can drive it really quickly down a back road, and it's really satisfying to drive. Very neutral, and it's definitely kind of a no-lift car. Like, if you can just keep your momentum up, it is really quick, and it's really, really fun. I feel like 924s and 944s aren't really happy sliding around like excessively. They're not like an E30 or even a Miata or something like that where you can, get the back end out and it's, the car kind of wants to do that. These, they're just happier sticking or sort of being on the edge of adhesion. And it's really softly sprung, which means that when you're on a back road, any bumps and irregularities just get completely absorbed with suspension. It's not a very precise feeling car, but it's a very tossable, confidence inspiring, very well balanced car when you push it, at the limit, and just really makes it fun to drive. And the harder you push it, the better it seems to feel, really. And the steering is, it's got a nice weight to it. The steering's actually heavier than you might think, considering the fact that it's got power steering. It has a nice heft to it, and it's kind of, like all the controls in this thing, like the steering, the shifter, and the brakes and everything and the throttle, they all have a nice kind of like mechanical, you know, it's an overused term, very mechanical and analog feel. When they brought back the 924 in 87, they also retained the original interior. And so, you know, when this thing came out in the mid 80s, it had what I would consider basically a retro interior, basically. So, I mean, if you have spent any time in like a 70s, you know, Volkswagen, like a Golf or a Scirocco, you know, this interior kind of has that similar vibe. The switches, the gauges, the way they're laid out, the font and the coloring and everything kind of have that vibe. I like it. There's a few interesting touches about it. The AC and the heat have different controls. It's got a really basic HVAC system. The tachometer is a reverse spinning tach, which is pretty cool. The driving position is low down and feels very sporty when you get in the car. The steering wheel is, you know, it's kind of vertically placed, and there's no adjustment on it, so you're kind of stuck with the way it is. It's good quality as well. You know, these cars, this was in an era when, you know, Porsche was spending a lot of money on their cars, building them, and it shows. It's got that typical German Porsche feel to it overall. Feels very, very good quality. All right, well, as usual, thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it. Subscribe if you like the content. Comment below what you think of the videos. You know, let me know what you think of the 924S in general as a model. And we'll see you in the next video.